Okay, now it is time to introduce our main speaker for tonight. Thank you, Rustum. KCC.
Hi, everybody. My name is Casey Crain. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be sober. I like to remind myself I'm lucky to be alive, and I'm grateful to be alive. Those of you that don't know me at all are going to, within the next 45 minutes or know me better than some of my blood relatives because of the nature of what happens in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's my belief that we are wired emotionally very much the same, and the general facts of our lives may diverge in many places, but we are bodily and mentally different from our fellows, and we are like each other. And it's a good thing because we need that unity in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, obviously there's a lot of stylistic differences among people, but who cares about all that stuff? You know, that's superficial stuff. Inside, I hope that the new people here find a home in Alcoholics Anonymous like the home that I've found. And I'm coming up on 23 years in about 8 or 9 days, and I'm very grateful for everything past 5 months, which was a new world record for me. But I did not like the concept of this being home in probably my first 5 years of sobriety. But I remembered a quotation from the poet Robert Frost, which is that home is that place where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. And, and that works for me. So if your little hand went up saying that you're an alcoholic and you want to be here, then we can't throw you out. So welcome. You know, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you're lucky, this will be home. I love AA, I love what it's done for me, and I love what it's done for the people that I care about most in the world. I want to thank Jerry for asking me to come here and participate, and all of the other people that I know here that I've gotten to know over the years. So many people that matter to me, that I care about, and that's different for me too, because I was one of those people that when I was out there, little by little, as my tolerance for alcohol grew, the milk of human kindness ran ever thinner in my veins, and my ability to empathize and have compassion was just about nil when I got here. And it kind of had to be because of the world that I lived in. I came from a good home. I came from a good family. My parents were college graduates, no screaming at midnight around our house, no alcoholism that you would notice. And I was born in Huntington, Long Island, New York. We moved around a couple of times, upstate New York and western Pennsylvania, where I went to high school. And then I went off to college at Penn State. But everything was just peachy until I was about 8 years old. I got polio. I got polio. This was before the Salk vaccine. I was crippled. I couldn't wiggle my toes. My legs didn't work at all. And I had to be carried around like a sack of potatoes. And I never had a wheelchair. I was carried from place to place. And my younger brother and sister were not allowed to be in the same room with me, nor were any other children allowed to be anywhere where I was for about 9 months. And this is not a good thing for a little kid. I figured this out into sobriety. I never thought about any of that until I was sober and did an inventory and a few other, recognitions of what made me what I am. At any rate, when I went back to school, I was shunned by the other kids. I had that incurable disease, and I didn't like that. And my attitude was, you don't like me, screw you. I never needed you in the first place, and I set out to be a loner, weirdo, Martian outlaw geek, and I succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. And And, I wasn't going to run away from home. We lived in a 12-room house with a fireplace in every room. I was getting a little crazy, but I wasn't too stupid yet. And so I retreated into a world of books. And I lived in a world of fiction until I left home to go off to college. I trained myself to speed read. Alcoholics are obsessive people. Don't tell us we can't do something. Stand back if you say, you can't do that. They told my parents I would, probably never walk again. I had a minute percentage of a chance of ever walking again, and I wound up being captain of the track team in high school because they told me I couldn't. And I was that kind of person, a real reverse psychology kind of person. And and that was good for me, but I felt different, and I was treated different initially, and living in a world of books, I could open a book early in the morning and start reading, and I would immerse myself in another time, another place, another cast of characters that stood in for living life. And that was my way of escaping until I drank. I was at Penn State about 10 minutes. Somebody shoved a can of beer in my hand. It was Schaefer's of Philadelphia, the beer to have. If you're having more than one, was their little jingle back in those days. And and I had 2 cans of beer, and I got rubber-legged drunk on 2 cans of beer because I'd never had a cigarette, I'd never had a beer, and I was in shape to run the mile. If you ask my parents, why is this whelp in college, they would have said, so he can be self-supporting through his own contributions. If you would have asked me, I would have said, I'm here to run the mile, because that was the glory event in track and field back in those days. And one day in practice, I ran a mile in 4 minutes and 7 seconds, and that was quick for somebody that had just turned 18. And one of the assistant coaches came up to me the next day and said, Casey, I've been looking into it, and on the progress you've been making, you will inevitably break the 4-minute mile within the next year. Keep up the good work. We're all behind you. And I remember what I felt when he told me that. I thought, he knows I can do it. I know I can do it. Everybody I run against knows I can do it. I don't have to do it. And at the end of that season, I never ran competitively again because it was, what the hell do I need with this running around in circle stuff? It's happy hour down at the Rathskeller, bring a sorority girl, drink for free, bingo, nirvana. So, nobody noticed that I was making decisions based on when I could drink next. When am I going to be able to have a drink? And I didn't notice either, but things were changing. And right before they kicked me out, and I was saying, you can't fire me, I quit, became one of my theme songs, like many alcoholics. I bounced around a little bit, and I wound up in Youngstown, Ohio. The dreaded 60s were about to kick off, and I was there again a very brief period of time. I was there ostensibly to go to Youngstown University, and somebody handed me a stick of boo or reefer, we called it back in those days, and I smoked that nasty giggle weed that night, and the next day when I woke up, I didn't have much of a hangover. The only part of me that hurt was my cheeks from cramping up from laughing so hard, and I'm loyal to the things I like. I probably smoked it every day for the next decade, no big deal. But it kind of opened the door to a lot of other things because, it was a felony to be in possession of any of this stuff at all. And I'd read a lot of books, and I thought, hey, maybe this felony is not so bad. Let's try a few other felonies too and see how that goes over. And as just like it was back at Penn State, I wanted this stuff called terpenhydrate and codeine. In the wintertime, it gets really cold out there, and you know, you get a little cough and you go down and sign for this stuff called terpenhydrate and codeine, better known as GI gin, and you know, it's 40% alcohol, a big jolt of codeine in there, and I went to every pharmacy in State College and then the nearby towns because I needed to have more of this stuff to give me that nice, comfortable feeling when I opened my linen closet, and then I got all my friends to go to all the pharmacies, and I could be very convincing, it turned out, and pretty soon I've got about 40 of these little bottles of terpenhydrate and codeine, and you know, I'm throwing away the clean linen because who needs that if you're drinking cough medicine every day? And it just opening that little door gave me that nice feeling. And that's the same kind of feeling I tried to reproduce in the 60s. I wanted to try to corner the market and have a little bit of whatever was floating around all the time. And I was pretty good at it. I organized some business relationships with the Italian mafia, the Lebanese mafia, a variety of biker gangs, the Black Panthers, the Laguna Brotherhood. I'm in Youngstown, Ohio, and I know guys in the Brotherhood in California. And, you know, and other people that would not normally mix, it's fair to say. And, you know, this is a prescription for things to go haywire somewhere, but you know, by now, I felt like a fictional character. I felt like I was heroic, like I was saintly, like I was bulletproof, that I was immune from the consequences because I had walked out of those books, and through drinking and the other things that went along with it, I could become this exempt human being. And, you know, you don't need a hell of a lot more than that, and something is going to hit the fan sooner or later. But I had a friend around this time who even the outlaw bikers wouldn't talk to this guy. You know, if you left your living room for a minute, he'd steal your TV and go sell it for $10. You know, he was one of those crazy outlaw bikers that, to me, he was a character, like a Damon Runyon character. You know, I collected people like this, and he came up to me one day and he said, "Casey, man, your friends and I, we've been talking. We're worried about you, dude, you know, and you're an alkie, you're a juicer, you drink too much, you're going to ruin your liver, you're going to grow up to be like our parents, you know, bad things are going to happen to you." And I said, "Let me get this right, Stoney. You want me to start running that white powder like you're doing and robbing places and all of that stuff? I just don't get it. I'm happy. I got my Pabst Blue Ribbon, I got a fistful of uppers, and bingo, you know, what more do I need?" And he said, "You know, it's no good talking to you. You know, nobody knows what you're going to turn into next. You know, it's like dealing with multiple personalities or something." And I thought, big concept there for old Stoney, you know, to deal with. And I did something to tick off my girlfriend, and she said, "You know, it's funny what you remember." I remember exactly what she said. She said, "You know, when you die, and it probably won't be long, I'm going to have you cremated and sell your ashes for $50 a spoon because, frankly, you're worth more dead than alive." And I thought, you know, this is not good. But it was kind of a backhanded compliment because $50 was a lot for anything back then. And my answer to this is, if anybody gave me any guff at all about my drinking, they're excommunicated. They got to go. You know, people didn't know how important drinking was to me. Drinking made life on earth tenable. It made it possible for me to sit in a room by myself and not feel like I was taking up too much space. You know, it opened up the world so that I could be a participant instead of an observer. And I wasn't about to tell people how important it was. So one day when things were going haywire with the little business I was operating, I piled everybody in a car and we headed for the left coast, and we bumped into the Pacific Ocean. I still remember it was right down where Synanon used to be, where right between those expensive hotels now, the Casa del Mar and Shutters, and we stood there like, you know, hillbillies in New York City looking around, and we thought, who do we know in L.A.? And of good old Ricky, better known as Mad Dog, lived over on North Vermont Avenue. So bingo, now 4 people are living in this one-room hellhole over on Vermont. Is a $75 a month roach farm. We had direct orders, never ever pull that Murphy bed out of the wall. So as soon as everybody left one day, I'm there by myself, so I yanked this thing down, and you couldn't see the wall. There were so many cockroaches, and it was like... So if you find one in your beer, you know, you just spit it out, you know, like that. Yeah, you've never done it. All high-end Rodeo drinkers here. Huh? Yeah. All right. Anyway, this was years before I hit bottom, man. So anyway, we're hardly ever there anyway. We're down at Barney's in the rain check room and Boja V and all those funky dives in that part of the world where Holloway runs down from the Strip down to Santa Monica Boulevard and all of that stuff. And it was a great time to be alive. It was a great time to be there. A lot of your famous rock and roll stars were still ambulatory, and some of them were friends and acquaintances of mine. Because I was, without any musical talent whatsoever, I was the guy that had cornered the market, you know, and this made me indispensable in some areas. And, you know, my good friend, Mad Dog, got stabbed in the heart by his hooker girlfriend, and that was a bad day for him. I went over to him and thought I was doing him a favor and pulled that white plastic-handled steak knife out of his chest, and that was a bad idea. You know, there's a lot of blood in a person, and most of it came out. He lived, I got to hasten to add. It was a Saturday night, I still remember, because we loaded 4 people, including him, in a Karmann Ghia. We stretched him out behind the seats in a Karmann Ghia, so he's back there all folded up, rattling when he breathes, and I'm driving on the sidewalk and doing this, you know, slalom driving. And he told me later, the last thing he heard in the ambulance when they were cut his clothes off of him was the guy in the back said, "You may as well slow down, this guy ain't gonna make it." How'd you like to hear that as your parting shot? And later he wakes up in the hospital with, anyway, he moved up to the side of Mount Hood up in Oregon, and he won't come down because the world was mean to him. And you know, this is probably the best friend I ever had in my life up until that time and for many years later. And I remember thinking, you know, if you can't take a little steak knife in the chest, maybe you ought to just stay home and pull the covers over your head, you lightweight. And so, you know, I mean, what had ever happened to the formerly bright bookworm, you know, the guy that tried to memorize the Baltimore Catechism so I could be a spiritual person, so I could be a moral and ethical person? You know, that person had been erased, and now it was, what does Casey and his little band of snaggletooth knuckleheads want to do today? So in a brilliant alcoholic move, I moved in with the Stabbers' 2 best girlfriends, and they were semi-professional party girls, and we had a beautiful Spanish-style home just off the Sunset Strip, and everything was going along very well. You know, I ran into some mob guys from the East Coast that had a variety of contraband, and they didn't know what to do with it, and I did. And because just like today, I had a wealth of friends in many walks of life, it seemed like, and only these were walks of life that were on the other side of the railroad tracks. And one of my guys was a mailman who was boosting major credit cards out of the mail in lieu of payment in cash. And so this gave me and my girlfriends a 29-day window of opportunity to go shopping, and which we did. And if the first order of business, if you're going shopping with other people's, you know, OPM, as they say, is you rent a car, and in case somebody looks out the window and gets the license plate number as you're beating feet. And so, you know, we go shopping, we come back, we park the car out in front, and no big hurry about getting that car back because it's not in your name anyway. And now I have another problem, which is I got this ever-expanding fleet of overdue rent-a-cars sitting out in front of my pad on half a block off of Sunset. And the way I dealt with that was a couple of ways. There was one guy was Jim, and Jim, he was my designated paranoid. His job was to stand at the window and pull the blinds back just a little bit, the drapes, and look out the window and be alert and report to me if, and I made sure he was very alert. And I tapped him on the shoulder one day, and he spun around, you know. I said, "What is it?" I said, "What's going on out there, man?" And he said, "Nothing to report, just a, you know, big bright light goes on and off and on and off." I said, "Them are days going by, Jim, you know, you're doing a good job. Keep looking out the window. You're going to be just fine." And there were other people like that around. And the other deal was if you came to a party at my place that was going on about 20 hours a day, and you were so rubber-legged drunk you could barely walk, I'd say, you know, you shouldn't be walking. Here, drive, and here's your very own rent-a-car. Get it the hell out of here, and don't come back. And so, you know, this little house of cards has got to collapse sooner or later, but a friend of mine who'd been overseas came back, and, you know, he had a better idea. He insulted my patients there. They were, you know, at this point I had them calling me doctor and all of that. I was, you know, getting really weird, and Denny he was the youngest first lieutenant in Vietnam. He's a story in himself. He had turned down a full scholarship to Notre Dame to join the Army because he didn't want to be a priest like everybody wanted him to be. And of course, there was a little deal called Vietnam going on at the time, which he neglected to think about. So bingo, they sent him to OCS, and then, you know, he's running through the jungle calling in airstrikes on his own position. So he was, you know, after a year of that, he was a little shaky and a little jumpy, so I calmed this guy right down, and we got to be fast friends. And he came over, and he said, "Listen, we got to get you out of here. You're playing God with these people's lives. You're killing yourself. You're killing these people. And anyway, I got a better idea. If we join the Merchant Marine, we can smuggle jewels and drugs from the South Sea Islands. We can retire to Costa Rica and live like kings." And I said, "You know, that is a better idea. Let's get the hell out of here." And so we rented a Mercedes and jetted out of town and went up to Portland and Seattle and San Francisco and tried to join the Merchant Marine. But, you know, you got to remember, I had hair down to here. I was ground down to 130 pounds. My eyes were gigantic, you know, and they were full up with smugglers, I think, already, you know, and they could read us, they could see us coming a mile away, so we never got in. And now I'm living on the streets of San Francisco, and my days as a Little League big shot are over, and I'm selling my blood for $5 a pint, and I'm eating at the Mission, and I'm pretty crazy, and I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing, and I was suffering you know, almost psychotic break type of hallucinations, and without anything in me other than good old screw top wine, that wine with integrity, you know, that cheap stuff, that Richard's Wild Irish Rose and Mad Dog and Ripple and yeah, you know, that 79-cent a quart stuff. And so we had to get out of there and wound up in St. Louis and then Chicago, and I lived in an abandoned train station in Chicago. And I guess I was homeless. I never thought, you know, I never said to somebody, you know, "Gee, I'm homeless. I should be worried about my future." You know, that wasn't the way it was. It was to me, you know, if somebody had come up to me and said, "Casey, you have a chronic, progressive, and fatal disease, and unless you do something about it, and unless you at least acknowledge the fact that you've got it, you're going to die a miserable and agonizing death, and there's going to be nothing anybody can do about it. And I would have said, no, you don't understand. I'm too smart, I'm too hip, I'm too cool, I'm on top of it all. You know, I'm not homeless, I'm on the road, man, you know. I'm not a bum, I'm a Dharma bum. You know, I'm not a fool, I'm a holy fool. And I could rationalize and justify my own slipping off the edge of the world. And I remember one day standing in a driving rain on an overpass over the Dan Ryan Expressway, and it was rush hour in the morning, and it was that gray, weird time of day anyway, and I'm soaked to the bone, but you can only get so wet. And I'm looking down at those people, and I'm thinking, look at those poor fools, you know, if they only knew what it was like to be free, like I am, you know. I'm free, and I don't have to be anywhere. Nobody with my last name knows where I am, and they hadn't known for a long time where I was, and it was true. And but I wasn't worried, you know. I was, I don't know, maybe I was crazy. I don't know. I suppose if I was rounded up by people with the, you know, the white jackets and the long sleeve coats, they would have locked me up. But I wasn't complaining. I was just going around jacking people up so I could get my flavor of wine for that day. And I wound up back in Youngstown, Ohio, where I felt safe. I was living in a crash pad, and one day I had $1 to my name, and only $1. And I went and bought a quart of that red Ripple wine, and not that crummy pagan pink stuff or that other crap, and that nice red Ripple wine, and it made me feel calm and safe just having it. And I got back to the crash pad, and I thought, you know, this is an hors d'oeuvre, and I need a banquet, you know, I need more than this. And so I scrounged around that place, and I found a syringe, and I drew up 2 cc's of red Ripple wine and fired it into my arm because, as my first sponsor said, you're probably not a social drinker then, are you? And I don't bring that up to gross you out or anything like that, but I told him it was in my inventory, and I told my first sponsor, a guy named Keith B., who had 13 months when I had 1 day, and you know, he was a good man. I told him about that, and I said, you know, I've never told anybody about that, and I'm going to keep a good eye on you to make sure you don't either, because I was very ashamed of it. I was guilty about that. I thought it was a twisted and sick thing for a person to do. And anyway, you know, you don't tell the junkies you're shooting wine. They'll say, here, try this. And you don't tell people that are drinking out of a glass you're injecting it. And so you're in limbo. And so being a Catholic youth, I knew all about that. And one day I found myself blabbing it from the podium in Culver City at the Key Group. I was not quite 3 years sober, and I immediately felt ashamed of the fact. And afterwards, a couple people thanked me, and one guy came up to me. I remember he was taller, and I looked up at him, and his eyes were going around like this, and he said, "I shot 151 rum, man." And I thought, wow, you must be a real crispy critter, you know. But then he added this weird thing, and he said, you know, I've never told another living human being about that until right now. And I said, you know what, we're free then. You know, there's 2 of us now, and we're not unique, and we are free in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous to be free from the chains of the past, the chains of alcoholism and addiction and all those things that want to draw us back into the world that we used to live in. We are free to go forward and get to be eventually the people that we were meant to be. And this is a little odd angle here, isn't it? And must be time for a drink. So I had to go further on down the line, and I went through 14 detoxes and 5 live-in rehabilitation programs, most of them in California. I was in Camarillo State Hospital for 10 weeks, and I was in the Way Back Inn and Warm Springs and Claire Foundation 6 times and all of that because, you know, that book, Alcoholics Anonymous, didn't make sense to me. It was that stultifying turn-of-the-century style that I just couldn't plow through, and the words didn't mean anything to me until I came out of that 14th detox, and then I opened that book up again, And all of a sudden, that book was talking right to me. And I don't know what had changed, but I do remember that feeling I had on my way into that last detox, and that was that I felt completely empty inside. I felt like I had already died, and that no matter what happened, I was going to die drunk, and there was absolutely nothing anybody could do about it, including me. And Chuck C. and all of the other great speakers of that day of 1982 could come and stand at the foot of my bunk and give me their best stuff, and it wouldn't do any good at all because I was beyond any human power. And I didn't realize what it was that had happened to me for probably 5 years. But what had happened was that I was surrendered at depth. I was surrendered enough to be able to listen with the ears of a dying man. And so I came back into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous where I had been court-ordered several years before. I had to carry a court card for a year, 3 separate times. I continually violated my probation. And they took away my driver's license. Then they took away my license to drive a bicycle in Santa Monica, which you had to have. I know why that happened. It's the night that I volunteered to fight the police dog that they said, guys like this, they shouldn't be out there riding bikes around. And they would have yanked my feet off if they could have got them off, I think. But and that's when I started sleeping in people's lawns too. You know, but now I'm back in AA. I'm surrendered, and and people want me to get a sponsor, and they want me to do a variety of things that seem kind of silly because, you know, there's warrants out for my arrest, and, you know, my life is caved in around my head. At the time, I'm living with this waitress. I hadn't worked at a job in almost 5 years where I had used my real name and real Social Security number. In fact, I hadn't worked at all in almost 5 years. I'd been living off the fat of the land, as I explained to my sponsor. But the way I got this sponsor was people gave me their phone numbers and business cards, and this guy was a planner for the Mattel Corporation, and that's that little toy company that makes the Barbie doll and the Malibu Ken. And I thought if I get this guy to be my sponsor, maybe I can talk him into making a little crazy Casey doll, you know. And then, even though I'm going to die drunk, I'll be immortalized in plastic, and I'll live on, you know. And that was my reason for asking this guy to be my sponsor, you know. So apparently motives don't count, and you got to watch out what you wish for too. I've sponsored a number of guys, and some of them very creative. And one guy who is a script writer also was talented enough for one of my birthdays to make in a professional box with professional graphics, a little crazy Casey doll. And the graphics are something else. You know, he's got the knife-wielding hooker and the pissed-off rental car guy and all of that. And I got to tell you that both of the women that I lived with in West Hollywood back in those days, I found out in my early days of sobriety, both of them had died as a direct result of alcohol and drugs. One of them never made it to 36 years old, and she died of liver and pancreas failure, and the other one didn't make it to 26 years old because she got strung out on Quaaludes. I remember the days when those were supposed to be non-addictive. She was doing about 30 a day just to stay even, and couldn't stand the detox process, and ate rat poison as a chaser. And you know what? Both of them and a lot of other people deserve to be here with us today, and they don't get to be here. And you know, my take on that is that each one of us here, no doubt, represents a whole lot of people that do not get to be here. They didn't know that sobriety was possible. They didn't know that Alcoholics Anonymous took people like us, and they deserve to be here every bit as much as I do. And in a lot of ways, I'm their living representative. And the other take on it is that if somebody is still breathing, don't give up on them. You know, they can be. I've seen countless people who are hopeless and helpless come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and their lives have turned around, and they wind up being comfortable and productive human beings who are comfortable in their own skin. And only because of Alcoholics Anonymous is this possible, as far as I can tell. And you know, I've had the privilege of being in big meetings and little meetings in a lot of places all over. and we're the lucky ones. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous is very strong in Southern California. When I was a GSR of a meeting, I had to go to these other area assemblies and so on, and right after one of the censuses, is that a word? After the census of Alcoholics Anonymous was taken, sober people in the world, we discovered that 17% of all sober people live in the state of California. That's about 1 out of 6 in the world. And so, you know, if you've snapped out of it here in Southern California, you lucked out. You could have, you know, you could have been in Keokuk or some other place. I'm sure it's delightful there, but, you know, this is the place to be. We lucked out. And, you know, I've seen a lot of people come and go, like I say, and I'm very lucky. I'm very blessed to be here at all. You know, things changed dramatically in my life, and I think it all happened because of the foundation that was created for me by my sponsor, who wanted me to get involved. He wanted me to have commitments at meetings. At a meeting like this, I would be the cigarette butt sweeper-upper outside at night. You know, people used to smoke a lot more back in the 80s, poor fools. And, you know, I was out there in the dark at night and sweeping away at those cigarette butts and picking them up. And all I had to know how to do was say goodnight. People would leave the meeting and they would say, "Good night, Casey." And I could say goodnight. I didn't have to know anything. I didn't have to know the steps or the traditions. I didn't have to, you know, do anything. I still remember the first meeting that where I had to read chapter 5. It was, I got out of my last detox on a Sunday. I did not sleep at all, and I'm in the Friday night men's stag, and I'm reading chapter 5 in the shakiest voice imaginable, and there's still some people around that I get to see that remind me of what I was like when I was new, and I was damaged goods. I had a psychiatrist tell me one time that, Casey, you have done irreparable harm to your central nervous system, and in order for you to function well enough to go down to Social Security and pick up your SSI check, you're going to have to take some of these and some of these. And he held up antipsychotic and antidepressant medication. And I did take that stuff, and in fact, I took it even a little more than prescribed, as Tommy Whalen likes to say, just in case a human feeling of any kind should try to sneak in there. And I didn't like that feeling, so I poured some vodka and gin on that, and that's how I wound up in Camarillo. And to wrap that one up, and so, you know, I'm not supposed to be here. I am not supposed to be here. I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and my younger sister, who's a award-winning author and has a PhD and teaches at NYU, said that she told me once that what has happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous fits the dictionary definition of a miracle better than anything that she's ever seen. And my younger brother has a little different take on it. He says, at least there's one less nut out there, you know, and they're both right. You know, I'm not on the run anymore. I'm not hiding from anybody. My number's in the phone book. I vote. You know, I started, you know, my sponsor taught me in my first year, use your real name and real Social Security number. This created a problem initially. You know, little red flags went popping up here and there, and but I got those things taken care of, and it turned out that I had a talent for sales, and I did that all through the 80s, and a guy in my home group says, if you want to make a lot of money, start making your amends, because you're going to need it, and they don't want their money, they don't want your money, they want their money back, you know, that kind of thing, and those things that I learned initially early on made a big difference in the way that I treated my life and treated my sobriety. It's really a gift. You know, we are the lucky ones. The trick is to stay in the winning minority. Do the things that people do in Alcoholics Anonymous. Do the steps and live by the traditions. It's, you know, I was in Toronto, and a guy gave a talk on the traditions at a traditions workshop, and he said something that I thought was very instructive. He said, Bill Wilson liked to state things as the problem and the solution, and so when he wrote the steps, he number one is stating the problem, admitting we're powerless and unmanageable. And number two states the solution. And if you do 3 through 11, then 12 will occur. You know, that's good stuff. You know, it's not about mega vitamins. It's not about A Course of Miracles and Conversations with God and a million other things and pharmaceutical cosmetology or any of that. It's about the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. That works. And there's over 2 million people that live a life where there is a degree of comfort that are living and designed for living that's outlined in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the key to success. I hope we can all stay sober. Thanks a lot.